Hello, this is the Sunday show at Hromadske International, the only prime-time TV program explaining Eastern European geopolitical storm in English, and I'm Nataliya Sedletska. And welcome to our special broadcast from Mezhyhirya. This is the name of the residence of the former Ukrainian President Yanukovych. Once it was the most guarded place in the country. The journalists were not allowed to get in, so every June the 6th, that is the day of journalism in Ukraine, media representatives were coming to the gates to protest against suppression of the freedom of speech. Yet after the revolution, during the first days, the journalists went here and found a lot of documents which were dumped into the lake. The media and investigative reporters has saved that data, which had become the evidence of high-level corruption. Mezhyhirya has become the symbol of corruption, but it had become open to the public, so you can see a lot of people spending their weekends here. Yet this month, June, it's also special because we are celebrating the Media Freedom Days here at Mezhyhirya. So people coming from around the region, they are gathering for the MezhyhiryaFest, where the journalists together, especially investigative reporters from Eastern Europe, discuss together what they can do next and how they can protect themselves and how they work together in this new world with the challenges. And now there is a premise for the investigative reporting festival MezhyhiryaFest, which is taking place already for 4 years here. It's not far from Kiev. And now there are not just the Ukrainian reporters, but also international investigative reporters, because, you know, there is a lot we can say about the international organized crime, and there is a lot to share. It's not a secret that in Eastern Europe, investigative reporters were always extremely important for promoting democracy, for keeping their governments accountable when the other institutions were not working. So in today's special broadcast of the Sunday show, we'll talk to the Ukrainian reporter Denis Bihus, who has recently just received a prestigious democracy award, international award for fighting corruption in Ukraine, who'll let us know more on what's new in this front in Ukraine. We'll talk to the journalist from Russia who has done the Panama paper story on Vladimir Putin. We'll go into details on how international organizations and companies are working with the rich and extremely corrupt governments in Central Asia and Azerbaijan. So this is just part of what we are going to do. Stay tuned. Panama Papers had been one of the biggest international journalistic investigation which was covering a number of governments, politicians. That was a big buzz of the last year, but we would like to know what is the follow-up, what is changing, and we're talking to Paul Radu, who is the executive head of the OCCRP project. They started with investigating corruption in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, then in Central Asia, and now this is a really global project, but of course Paul knows a lot about our region. But starting with the Panama Papers, you know, that is a story. There is a huge success if we speak about the investigation. But now, can we speak about the results, about the impact of that? Because, you know, investigations today, they are making a lot of people kind of discouraged that, you know, all the politicians are corrupt and it leads to nowhere. Do we know about the, I don't know, any kind of things which led to something, which had brought some, you know, positive results in courts and elsewhere?
Well, you're right. I mean, Panama Papers was all about the hypes of the names involved, you know, including names in Ukraine and Russia and other countries. But really, Panama Papers is about the whole system. It's a rigged system that was used by corrupt politicians, by criminals, by controversial businessmen to actually do business, to make money in an illegal way. So that is what's changing with the Panama Papers project. So right now it's much harder for them to do business as usual. So I think that changed quite a bit. Even if people were not sent to jail, as it happened in a few other countries, in our region is harder to put people in jail, especially people in power. Although in my country, in Romania, that happens quite a lot lately for the past few years. But the thing is, you gotta attack the system, and Panama Papers exposed the system in its entirety. So now it's much harder for these people to use the same mechanisms to do business. So that's very important. And don't forget, at the level of the European Union, there's an open investigation into Panama Papers. There's a group officially investigating at the level of the European Union. And out of this group, there were a few ideas that came out and that are going to become practice very soon. And one is to create a registry of beneficial ownership at the level of the EU. So no company can do business in the EU without knowing who is the real owner of the company, and that's very, very important, because that's exactly how these criminals, how these corrupt politicians and businessmen do business right now, by stealing, European funds, by stealing national funds and all this. And secondly, one thing that people must understand about Panama Papers is that this is a gift that keeps on giving. I mean, Panama Papers is not over. Even we published in March of this year an investigation that we titled the Russian Laundromat. It is about more than 20 billion US dollars laundered via banks in Moldova and in Latvia, and including connections to Ukraine. A key piece of information for that investigation came from the Panama Papers database. There's a lot of information there that is not explored yet, that will be explored, because journalists are working actively. So that's a place where you keep on going to get information. This is why I say it's something that will probably never stop, because some of the information in Panama Papers can become relevant later in time. And that information, coupled with other leaks, coupled with other databases, can create new investigative reporting, and it is creating new investigative reporting. In fact, we're working right now at an investigation that is, I think it's going to be quite impactful, that we're going to publish in the fall, and some of the information for this investigation comes from Panama Papers as well as from other sources.
When we talked to a lot of journalists from the region, they said that they were uncovering corruption before, and there was a high-level corruption here in Mezhyhirya, where the Ukrainian president used to live, and what we knew about that place was thanks to the investigative reporters. But how their practices are changing, because what with the corrupt officials and the criminals, they adapt very fast. As soon you found something, you put a light on it, they find new ways. So what are now new tricks besides, we knew tax havens, that was the thing, but now, you can dig into that. So
the thing is, I mean, even with tax havens, they are still using the old tricks. There are not so many ways to go about corruption, to do corruption, because, in the end, it's about stealing money from someone's pocket. That's it, you're stealing money from the citizen's pocket. So it's theft, it's simple theft. You can put in between offshores, you can put, better shares companies and all this. So these tricks are still used. And one of the main things here is, for instance, at the level of the European Union. Although the European Union is investigating Panama Papers and it's taking all this action against better shares and against, against offshore havens, there are a few countries inside the European Union where you can create companies that ensure more secrecy than the companies that were established by Fonseca in Panama. So in my country, in Romania, there are more than 300 companies that are owned via better shares. Better shares means, a piece of paper where you have 100 shares in a company. Whoever holds that piece of paper in their hand is their company. So if I give you the piece of paper, it's your company. If I put it in my pocket, it's my company, without any other documents, attached to it. So these are things that are ongoing right now in the EU. We don't need to go to Panama Papers. We need to clean our house first, and so all the politicians, dirty politicians in the EU are using these tools, So outside of Panama Papers, there's a lot of work to be done. For instance, in Austria, you can establish Privatstiftungs, these private foundations that can be used, in various ways. And I think actually Mezhyhirya here was owned by a company connected to a Privatstiftung, So there are various tricks that are still used by, so it's still the old tricks. Now there will be new tricks, So we see right now money laundering. Our latest project about the Russian laundromat Laundromat, about the 20 billion laundered via banks in the EU, it targeted banks because there were more than 500 banks involved in, dealing with this money. And now we have Bitcoin, and Bitcoin it's still a small part of the economy, of the world economy. It's really, really small. But if you'll crack down on banks, and this needs to happen, lots of criminals will probably move towards Bitcoin, so we'll see if that's, how that will go. And then we have to adapt a little bit more and to use more technology in our investigative reporting to be able to expose this stuff.
Roma, your investigation, which was called Laundromat, that was an investigation with a number of media, but you were working on it, showed how the money was laundered through numbers of European banks, including the Moldovan banks, and it was like a huge amount of money, up to 22 million, as far as I remember.
Billion.
22 billion of the US dollars. So what is the result? Do we see what's going on with this story?
Well, it depends on different countries. So let's say that the main victim is Russia, and there are no any results because there were 2 criminal cases started after our investigation, which started 3 years ago. And I was witness in both cases, and I saw that the investigators, they didn't want to do anything real, let's say. Because the criminal cases were started by the lowest departments of the investigative committee, which means that the Russian state was not really interested in investigating the case. But simultaneously, we had very good results in other European countries. So there was an investigation started in the UK, and there were hearings in Parliament, and the Deputy Minister of Finance had to explain, why the British banks and companies were involved in this scheme. Simultaneously, there was a big case in Denmark, and the Prime Minister had to say that, he doesn't like the situation, and he's very sorry that it happened with Danish banks. And there is an ongoing investigation as well. And the latest news is that 2 days ago, actually, I heard about it just today. A friend of mine, Paul Radu, who was involved in the investigation as well, told me that there is a commission, a special commission inside the European Parliament, which is called the Russian Laundromat, just as our story, that they will study the case. And the main idea is to understand why the European banks were involved in the money laundering and why their compliance procedures did not work.
So of course the people could read the full investigation, and we would encourage them, again, those who don't know maybe, but really who are the main beneficiaries, in the end, in this large scheme?
There are many of them, to be honest, and so the money was mixed. The money from different crimes was mixed. So the biggest beneficiary we were able to identify was a mysterious businessman who is the main contractor to the Russian railways. Alexei Krapivin, and he was involved in many, I would say, scandals and criminal cases all over the world. But among others, there were European parties, pro-Russian parties, which got the money. There were multinational corporations like Siemens, like Hitachi, and others. And of course, it doesn't mean that they were stealing the money from Russia, but it means that they were involved in grey import schemes. So you can call them the smuggling schemes.
To what extent the big banks can control, and if you generally assess the situation, that there would be the big bank or companies would have their smaller companies in Estonia or the Baltics or elsewhere, so that's kind of a usual way to launder the funds. What depends on the headquarters? To what extent the headquarters can and are eager to remain, have a good reputation and can say that, oh, that was not us?
Right, so look, an important word you mentioned is whether they are eager or not, because on the one hand, they are not responsible for clients which are out of their bank. So they're responsible just for the clients inside their banks, and they gotta check them, they gotta control them, and so on. But they do not check clients which send money to their clients from foreign countries or from foreign banks. Which was a problem in Laundromat case. So what the big banks said, they said that, our client was okay. Our client was, let's say, Siemens. But Siemens got money from bogus companies, shell companies, from notorious banks like Trasta Commerzbank. Its license was revoked recently, from Moldovan Bank, Moldincon Bank, and so on. So I would say that the main problem here is the will. if the banks want to control the money flows, if they don't want to be involved in these big money laundering scandals, then they gotta check not only their clients, but also the origin of the money which their clients get.
Regarding the country, Moldova had been particularly kind of in the heart of it all, and so that is very special case when you have a small country, which is more or less, so many had been done through that. So really, are you following the case? What's happening with this in the most involved country?
Well, look, the main problem here is that the main victim is Russia. And with money laundering cases, you always, in order to prove money laundering, you got to prove the first crime, because money laundering is always the second crime. So in order to prove money laundering, you got to prove the predicate, so the first crime. And Moldovans, the main problem with them was that they couldn't get any talks and help from Russia. So they were asking for help, they were begging for help, and they got nothing.
With the results, the investigation have become international, right. The journalistic investigation. But how about the law enforcement? Are they still in our region, in Eastern Europe, able to investigate something on their own? And are the things moving in that direction?
Well, they are. Let's say that in Russia, the case was pretty well investigated by the operatives from FSB. They did a really good job. But when it came to a criminal case itself, because you know that before starting a criminal case, you got to do a lot of job in terms of proving the crime and so on. So before the criminal case, they did a really good job. The same in Moldova. But when it came to criminal case, which means punishment for people involved, then the problem starts. Because you know, in this particular case, some big names were involved, including Igor Putin, who is he's not brother-in-law, I don't remember. Well, he's relative to the president, to Vladimir Putin. And some people from FSB were involved as well. So when it comes to a criminal case, people are not so eager, I mean the law enforcement are not so eager to investigate them up to the end, because otherwise they would need to imprison those who are in power.
So there is always the question, how difficult is really to investigate Putin, you know, and what we really know? Because I think there is a will of the reporters to find out something.
Well, we know a lot, but the problem is when you say proving things, Putin is smart. He will never sign any doc and he will never sign any financial records and so on. So he is a smart guy. So in terms of proving, you know, we've proved a lot with Panama Papers and with the Radugin case, because in my opinion, it's not Radugin's money, it's Putin's money, yeah? And we had a lot of collateral proof to say that. But I mean, yeah, you're right, you know, there is no any signature by Putin, there is no any signature by anybody else from his family, because they're smart people, you know. But, you know, if we think as law enforcement, we say that there is a bunch of proofs. We couldn't find a man with a gun, you know, who shot somebody, but, you know, we could find witnesses who say that they saw him, we could find, I don't know, wiretaps and so on and so forth. The same with financial crimes, you know, you will not find a dog signed by the president, but you'll find many other dogs signed by people who are close to him.
Denis, you've just received the pretty prestigious international award for democracy that was for the anti-corruption fighters. So you're doing the investigative program here in Ukraine, which is extremely popular and I hope and can say to some extent effective. We're speaking now about Ukraine in 2017, and you know there is something in that still the investigative journalists from Ukraine receive the international awards for fighting corruption. So what are probably the key cases, the most important things in a way how corruption is done today?
We have only one thing that they actually have a possibility to steal. It's always people's money. I mean, if you talk about some budget, if you talk about some rules in the country, there is just nothing else. So I'm not sure that for now, tactically, we have some difference between times 4 years ago. That's still some public procurement schemes, that's still some monopolies who controlled sectors of economy. The difference is that For now, we have something that I can call corruption competition. I mean, at Yanukovych's time, there was a solid pyramid of corruption. Yeah? So any official was in this system. And today we have a lot of how to say a lot of wings, yeah, a lot of groups that have some competition between them, and this is really helpful.
Can we speak about some particular spheres, industries? Because, you know, somehow my guess would be, from what I'm following, that somewhere it's cleaner, more transparent, but that's where there are less money, you know, like on the healthcare, there would be the small corruption with the people paying, but then there would be fields which are really still are very, very closed, and industries.
We talk a lot about transparency, and transparency by itself, it's not about corruption. Yeah, I mean, for now we have a lot of some transparent sectors, and we think that I don't know, corruption in this sector gone even bigger than in previous times. It's not true, because we just see more. Transparency can't work without some judicial system, yeah? And that's a problem for all of us, because for now we see a lot and still can do not so much. If we talk about industries, I don't know, it's for now I think it's the same. It's heavy industry, it's bank sector, it's maybe all that have any touch to state monopolies, and it's Ukrainian railways as it is. I think we have better situation for now in oil and gas system. Yeah, that I saw very smart steps in Naftogaz. I saw a lot of good steps in gas sector.
Meaning good steps to become more transparent and less corrupt, or good
okay,
steps
that's not about transparency. Yeah, when we talk about how to say about oil sector and about gas sector, that's more about just smart management decision. They don't increase transparency level. They increase economic level, and they increase competition on this field.
And look, are there any particular cases where you have seen that there was a result, that the law enforcement was involved, and the people, those about whom you were investigating, your team had been investigating, that they've been at least prosecuted, and where it's extremely difficult to see, though the results are obvious?
If you talk about example, for last month, I think we push 3 criminal procedure against Batkivshina's party, against Lashko in touch with his illicit enrichment, and against official from from tax department. But the biggest problem is that if we'll talk about some results, yeah, we have much more. We have more results when we don't need to connect with the prosecutor's office or with the courts. I mean, if you want to cancel some public procurement, you have to just write about it, and someone in this department who control this procurement usually just cancel it, because nobody wants any problem. If you need to start any criminal case and how to say, add any official investigation, okay, that's a problem.
And look, the last one, we here at Mezhyhirya, the former Yanukovych residence.
Yeah.
But rather the general question, there was a lot of enthusiasm when we have seen the papers of previous president, and there were a lot of journalistic cases. The investigation had good chances to be investigated, though as was even the political will by the Ukrainian opposition at that time. It looked like back then to investigate their opponents, former party of region and the others. We can go into details, but in general, how do you see that?
At least I can't see any moves on this way. Our present officials make a very sweet photo with former officials from Yanukovych's time. Yeah, that's big, I'd say. Big 100% nothing.
How we can explain that? Yeah, it's just not there really. You can't have their direct link that I don't know. President has a connection to that, guy from the party of region. There is not that obvious thing to say that they have either. I'm speaking about a top official that they have a common business or something, and they
But
are
why not?
still political opponents.
But why not? You see, if all your economy based on maybe 1,000 people, they always connected one with another. Maybe it's not so obvious like the co-founders in some company, but Ukrainian economy it's not big at all. Yeah, I mean, and it's extremely monopolized, and in any moment, any money bag have some connection with everyone. So I think we have to look on this not like on the network of some connections, yeah, some separate connections, but look through it like a one big bunch of connections and shared money in very small Ukrainian economy.
Nataliya Sedletska is the anchor and the editor-in-chief of one of the most popular and impactful investigative program scheme for the Radio Free Liberty, and had been investigating a lot of high-level corruption in Ukraine here. So Nataliya, we're now here at MezhyhiryaFest trying to assess some of the phenomena. So now, how is it for your team working? How the corruption in Ukraine has changed and the work of the journalists? You have your program and your journalists, the court cases with the security service, and you do have difficulties today. What are they, and what do we need to know about how the corruption changed here?
Sure, the corruption changed. We could say that under Yanukovych regime, corruption schemes were much simpler, and on one hand, it was easier to investigate them. Now corruption schemes are more complicated, but at the same moment, we were able, with the help of this civil society and civil organizations, we were able to disclose the public registries. So it made it made easier for us to uncover this corruption, because we've got open register of companies, open registry of assets, of land registry, and so on. So it's much easier to investigate. But now politicians and corruptioners, they just hide it better.
Do you know any particular, let's say, industry, which are probably the most closed, where it's the hardest to dig?
The army contracts are very closed, and it's really hard to investigate procurements for the Ministry of Defense. But also, if we talk where the most corrupted spheres are, I would say that it is state companies, state-owned companies. So it's not like a budget of some ministry, but it's state companies which are throughout Ukraine and are still owned by the government.
Your journalist had been, followed by the security service. Also, there is a defamation campaign against you, against some of the your team reporters. So, really, how does it impact your work, and really, what are current, your relations with the state, with the law enforcement?
Yes, so the security service of Ukraine is the structure which is still unreformed, and it's still very, very close. To a contrary of other law enforcement agencies, they haven't published publicly their assets declaration. And the law says that they should have published them. So now it is still the law enforcement structure that is really hard to investigate their potential corruption inside of the structure. That's why we are looking very closely into them, into the workers that are working there. We have heard so many complaints on one specific department of Security Service of Ukraine. It's called Economical Department. They have to defend economy of Ukraine. So we heard from business and entrepreneurs so many complaints on this department that they are just simply, starting to a criminal case, and then by paying money, this criminal case will be closed and so on. So that we thought, how can we prove in any kind, in any way this. So we simply went to this department and we put a camera and we were filming what cars these people that are working in this department are using. And these people are making about probably not more than $400-500 per month. But they are driving cars starting from $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, and $50,000. So their cars are much more expensive than they could afford by their governmental salary. We sent a request to Security Service of Ukraine saying that we're going to publish this report. Are you going to comment on this before publishing? They haven't responded, and imagine just 1 hour prior to our program on air, we receive a letter from Security Service of Ukraine which says that if you're gonna publish this story in this way, there will be a criminal responsibility by your journalists, because we are secret service and it's not allowed to publish information about our employees. After that, we published the story because I thought that they were just trying to threaten us, because what they do not want is to publish the information not about their secret agents. There was no secret agents in our story, but they don't want to publish information that these people somehow are making much more money unofficially.
I would say dispute between civil society activists and some people from the government, we would be blamed like grant eaters, there is a Ukrainian term, or those who are like panickers, so the people who are not seeing that there are good results, sometimes trying just to see the bad side of the government, which especially at this time make Ukrainians very depressed, and underestimating the good things which are done sometimes by the government in a very difficult times, in the time of the war for Russia. So because the more corruption we show, there would be more funds coming for our companies. What would you say on that discussion? And aren't really we are seeing just the bad things and not mentioning the good things?
I think it's a role of investigative journalism to criticize the government and to find facts, that have been wanted to be hidden, to uncover such facts. It's just a role. We do not have to say about good things only. We have to uncover bad facts. That's true. But I think that all this agenda, that it's not patriotic to criticize the government. It's inspired by corruptioners mainly, who just want the system to not change.
You were working a lot with international companies on the money laundering schemes, and so in the end there was always, and still we understand that a lot of money laundering may take place because there are the Western companies, there are tax haven. and some of the governments there they let those schemes to take place. Do we see any development, and do we see that, in the end, your old investigation could be, could end in something, and there would be some results, the court, the convictions?
Absolutely, there are already results. Yes, of course, people don't get directly to jail right after the investigation. There should be some process, but also there is no straight effect from investigative journalism, and especially in countries like Ukraine. But there, I would say, major impact of that is that after some stories, we've got new legislation adopted. Let's say public registries are open, electronic declaration law is adopted. Actually, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau was also created because it was a long history of investigating corruption, and not only, of course, but it's a small piece of it. But still, I think it's a result in strategical result and not fast result mainly. But if we talk about more international aspect and especially on offshore problem, I have a personal experience and personal story, because 2 years ago I was in Great Britain taking part into British investigative documentary about the dirty money flowing into London through offshore companies, like corruptioners, like Ukrainian or Russian corruptioners are purchasing real estate. On the name of companies, offshore companies, and nobody know who the real owner is. So this documentary got big impact in the UK, and after that some legislation was adopted in the UK, and it says that you have to disclose who the real owner is, and this campaign on disclosing offshore anonymity is going through the whole world. There are few new initiatives regarding disclosing of public registries in many countries, also in offshore world. So I think it's a good tendency, and there is a development.
Miranda, you are the regional editor for OCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and you are dealing with Azerbaijan and Central Asia, which are really there is no secret, this is authoritarian regimes. In general, we know that there is corruption there. There is no really democratic process that the corruption would influence the society. But really, what are the stories we're working now? What a development? What is the recent development? We follow, the really very tragic cases of the persecution of the Azerbaijani reporters. We hear less about the Central Asia, though we know that people are pushed away from the region, those who are investigating.
Well, in terms of Central Asia, any journalists that really did any stories that authorities didn't agree with are already, they have already left the country. And this is something that's been going on for, 5-10 years. So it's not new. I think what's happening in Azerbaijan now is a real crackdown that took place many years ago in Central Asia. These countries are operating in complete impunity. What you know here is, judiciary, police, independence doesn't exist there. You will be framed with, illegal drugs, or you will be just accused as a journalist for attacking a policeman, and that will take you for a month in jail. So, and then, you can be charged with corruption or with illegal work, and that could be, years-long sentences. I think what's also going on is that authorities are cracking down on access to information. So even where you had the ability to report and obtain documents, it's now becoming increasingly difficult. The media are being closed down in Azerbaijan. The most recent thing is that, for example, RFERL Azeri service is not allowed. Basically, their website is blocked. So they can't even, reach the audience inside the country. So the authorities are really working very hard to shut down any kind of independent voice or any kind of criticism of their actions.
So, for instance, in particular with Azerbaijan, in case of Aliyev, there was so much evidence, international evidence, and we're speaking about a really, really big money because this is an oil-rich country. So really, what are the things we can, tell? Because it's kind of, yeah, he's corrupt. It's there. But what are the ways really to do something with that? Maybe there are sometimes the involvement of the Western companies, which are more transparent, and sometimes you can, find something. And how do you see the reaction of the let's say, international law enforcement, which might somehow find something that there would be at least any, I wouldn't say punishment, but at least any, result, any procedure, any investigation?
Well, Azerbaijan is very good into bribing their own way into US and EU. I mean, when the President Trump was inaugurated, one of the first clients in his hotel was actually Azerbaijan embassy, who paid for a lavish party on the day of inauguration. They have been bribing, EU officials. It's a well-known case of MP Volonte from Italy, who has received money to basically support Azerbaijan. For a long time, Azerbaijan was putting a fake face with the European Union, saying, "Oh, we want to be close to you. We want to cherish European values." And then on the other side, they have been slowly cracking down on journalists and activists and so on. Other problem is that, yes, it is a very oil-rich country. European and US companies have massive interests in Azerbaijan. There is a lot of money to go around. And I think part of the problem is that from the European perspective, what you see is a very rich family, buying properties in London, opening exhibitions. They ran a massive foundation which has been building statues all over Europe, paying a lot of money. So what they see is, richness and influence, and they don't really care about, and they don't know about corruption and how regular people live.
And is there any movement of the Western governments? Because, we are speaking about, we at Hromadske, we as a Ukrainian investigative journalists, who had to be interested in the corruption in the region because it's so connected, started to raise the issue. We are following to the commands of the foreign governments, the bank officials who say that, there should be more transparency in money laundering. But do you feel there is any kind of movement, and among some of the politicians there would be some who are really eager to fight those on the European and international level?
I think all the reporting about, especially the case of Hatija Ismailova, who was jailed for 7 years and released after huge international pressure, basically is opening eyes in Europe, and people are more skeptical, at least, about Azerbaijan and the first family of Azerbaijan. I think what we need to do very often in countries like Azerbaijan, Central Asia, average people in our countries don't know how bad these countries are. What they see is a postcard perfect images of, huge glass buildings, the richness, the wealth, but they don't see the real life of Azeri people. And I think we as a journalist, we need to speak about it and show the true picture. I think there are also consequences. We did one of the stories about the gold mine that was owned by the first family. It turned out the family couldn't sell their gold because it became publicly known that they were behind the gold mines. So they were forced to, pass on that business. And I think that showed that there are consequences. And I think more reporting we do, the more effect it will have.
If we speak about Central Asia, there are, because they are not so trying to reach the West, they are not so, probably well known, so there is not that much international interest. But we speak about Turkmenistan, which is one of the closest countries globally, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. Yeah, there are really different things in there. But what are really the stories to follow? Kyrgyzstan is semi-democracy. Tajikistan, I think things are getting worse there. What we know with the family and his, son, who might become the president in a couple of years and currently the mayor of the capital. We had a story of the Uzbekistan where we have Karimov as probably the dictator of the region, who passed away last year. But still, so that's maybe confusing for a lot of people, but I think it's very important that these stories are becoming prominent. So would you, let us know a bit in some of the stories to follow in this region?
Well, I think, Central Asia is actually where we can have an effect. We've done a lot of stories in the past couple of years, basically proving Western companies paying massive bribes in order to enter the markets in Uzbekistan, enter the markets in Tajikistan, because this is a big market with a lot of money to be made, and every Western company basically have their fingers on it and they want to make money. And I think the good thing about our part of the world is there is a rule of law. And if our company goes and bribes some official in Tajikistan, in Uzbekistan, the authorities here will react and will either fine the company or there might be even a prosecution. I think in case of Gulnara Karimova, which I worked on together with SVT, she's the former, she's now in the house arrest. People who worked with her, who were laundering money for her, are all jailed in Uzbekistan. The U.S. authorities are looking to recover more than $1 billion. Nataliya Sedletska will be fined probably about $800 million or over $1 billion for bribing the regime. Wimpelcom has already been fined hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think there are consequences, and I think the way what we can do is. Somebody in Uzbekistan doesn't care about keeping money in Uzbekistan. They're not stealing in order to own a massive palaces there. What they're stealing for is in order to, have palace in France, in UK, in Hong Kong, and these are also places where they'll keep their money. So as long as we watch out for this, report about the corruption, report about the bribe, there is a chance that money will be recovered for the people.
Can you give more details on the development in Tajikistan? Because this is probably the least covered country. It's the poorest. There is some Kyrgyzstan, the journalists still can travel there. Uzbekistan is also very, rich in terms of resources. Kazakhstan is trying to get foreign investment with their gas companies. But this country were really for a lot of time had been ignored because it's poor, it doesn't have that much oil reserve, but that's what we know, that it's really now when there are more and more journalists kicked out and there is some kind of even the worst situation.
Well, Tajikistan, president has many daughters, and those daughters
9,
are
I
husband,
think.
yes.
And not the 9, and anytime you do the investigation about one daughter.
Yes, and the president is very sensitive about his daughters, but even more about the son-in-laws who are basically running the business. And what we have done, these people, one son-in-law will own literally his own empire. And this empire would control, a huge percentage of the economy. It's going to range from the mines till, even, issuing car license plates in the country. So basically, you have one family which is trying to control the whole country.
Okay, so keep up the good work. I think it's really, being a Ukrainian, we know how difficult it is sometimes to raise an international attention when it's needed, because, it's not just about them, but about the fact that, the money are laundered elsewhere, and you still expect from the West some standard, if you speak about the values and the rule of law. And really, then you see the Central Asia, where, even we don't pay enough attention to explain what's happening.
Well, as a journalist, it's a fascinating region for me. In my part of the world, if somebody steals $1 million, you think it's a big deal. In that part of the world, people steal in billions. And, and they do it so bluntly and without even trying to hide. They act as, there's nobody who will ever do anything to them.
I do think it's also the interesting thing because, the region is still a sphere of influence of Russia. So there is the Western companies trying to come, but therefore it's not so under the scrutiny of the foreign reporters as some others region where there is a long history of the Western companies working.
That is true. Foreign reporters are normally not allowed in, and then if you are allowed in the country, you will be followed. And I think we do more damage than good by basically, for example, working with the local reporters who then get harassed and lose job or are suffering in other ways. I think those are the countries where secret services conducting massive surveillance. They're monitoring all the communications. Your hotel might be bagged. You might have a camera in your hotel. So as a Western reporter, you need to be extremely careful what you do and how you act.
Scott, you're an investigative reporter from the Washington Post, and you were dealing with the difficult cases of investigating your own security service, Homeland Security in the US, Abu Ghraib. So, this isn't, especially the Abu Ghraib story, it's kind of an old story, so we knew that there was abuse by the US Army in the prison in Iraq. If you speak about the investigation of the Abu Ghraib, that was kind of like game changer, because there was still when this story had been brought to the light, there was still the U.S. tried to play this the good power, which tried to we're speaking about the freedom, speaking about the democracy, and it was kind of an evidence that how many wrongdoings the Bush administration had been doing there. Later there was a Guantanamo, but with this kind of investigation, what was the impact? Had it changed the way the army operating, especially in these sensitive cases of dealing with the suspect terrorists? What are still the practices which are existing, and what are maybe the government had to respond and to stop?
Our investigation showed that the abuse at Abu Ghraib and at Guantanamo Bay was much deeper and broader than was previously disclosed. So the administration at the time said that the Abu Ghraib abuses and the abuses at Guantanamo are isolated incidents, and they were confined to just a small band of Army men and women, but that wasn't really the case. And when we were able to get access to all of the documents and all of the photographs and the internal investigations, we quickly realized that this was part of a concerted effort by the military and by the CIA to break down these detainees and to try to get as much information as possible out of them. Pleaded with us not to publish it. They believed that the military was going to be at risk if we published this information, and we decided to go ahead and publish it because we believe that what the military was doing, a lot of the military lawyers and a lot of the people in the military felt that had crossed the line, and that by torturing detainees was a violation of the Geneva Conventions, and by doing that we were putting our own servicemen and women at risk if they ever got caught or captured, that they would be tortured as well. So in a way, we felt that we were doing a public service by exposing this.
Were the people punished in the end? Because there is always the case. There is a big story in the media, there are a lot of talks, and then there is a long court hearing, and sometimes these cases are kind of dropped from public memory.
Right. So a small band of people were convicted of crimes for abusing the prisoners, but the people up the chain of command were not held accountable. And to this day, they've never been held accountable. I think it's absolutely outrageous, because these are the people who were responsible for the command and control of Abu Ghraib. They're responsible for the men and women under their command, and they should be held accountable, just like anybody else should be held accountable.
Are there any tools which you are following that the law enforcement agencies could really implement in order to be more, let's say, accountable, be more transparent? It's really the difficult situation. We understand we are in a country in a war where there is a security threat, where you definitely sometimes talking to, the criminals or suspect terrorists. So there is a chance to cross the line. So what are practices maybe had been enforced and might be enforced that this line, it's more difficult for them to cross?
We have whistleblower protections in our country. So a whistleblower is somebody who comes forward, blows the whistle and says, I am a witness to crime, I'm a witness to wrongdoing, I'm a witness to corruption. And so we have some processes that are in place that protect people who do that. In the military, they're not that strong. And so I think strengthening those protections so that it not only encourages people to come forward when they see wrongdoing, but protects them from retaliation when they come forward and report wrongdoing.
How common is the practice of the cover-up in law enforcement? How common is this idea of whistleblowing? The officer would, cover the soldier, and the general would cover the officer.
The person who reported the Abu Ghraib abuse was not protected, and his life was threatened. He had to move his family. He had to leave the town that he grew up in. So his identity was actually disclosed by the then Secretary of the Defense. Hopefully we've learned from that and we protect these people. It's really important to protect them when they come forward.
How would you explain the relations of your investigative unit, of Washington Post investigative unit, with the the security services like NSA? Papers like the Washington Post, they're independent, but they're close to government. The government usually needs them. You have the press corps. You do a lot of stories. You need to have the interview the top officials. So at the same time, they need these papers. At the same time, there is an investigative unit which digs into this heart of the system and does something they would really dislike. Mm-hmm. So there is this kind of a general brand of Washington Post and investigative unit. So how you build the relations?
Our newsroom is completely independent of the government.
Yeah.
And we do not cooperate with them. We do not share information with them. We see ourselves as a check and a balance on the power of the government. None of our reporters would ever compromise their positions or their integrity to get access to a story. And if somebody doesn't want to give us access to something and they want something in return, we don't do deals like that. We will walk away from it. And if somebody denies us access, sometimes it's almost a badge of honor, and we are able to get the information in other ways.
The security service always put this argument that it's about security. How you answer this question for yourself? Were there the cases where you have doubts? Would you endanger really? Are you going too far? How you and your journalist, what are red lines for you?
So it is a balancing act, and so we always listen very carefully to the intelligence services. Sometimes the White House will contact our top editors. Sometimes the head of the CIA or NSA will contact our top editors. In the case of Abu Ghraib, the Secretary of Defense and his people contacted our top editors. And so we will always listen to them. We'll ask them why they believe that the disclosure of this information is perilous to maybe people in the field. Maybe it would expose methods and sources. Maybe it might expose intelligence agents and get them killed. We obviously don't want to do anything that's going to expose ongoing investigations or expose intelligence sources. So we'll always listen to them, and then we decide what we think is the most important thing for our readers.